Welcome to today's edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show podcast.
Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. We hope all of you had a fantastic Thanksgiving, wherever you may be across this great country or around the world. We are ready to continue to fight for freedom on all fronts as we return from Thanksgiving, and we certainly hope that your travel went well, that your family and friends are all doing fantastic, and that you were able to spend some time thankful to live in the greatest country that has ever existed in the history of the world. As we progress, unfortunately, craziness, zaniness, insanity continues to reign on the left wing in this country, Buck. And we played in advance, and thanks to Buck for sitting in on Friday. I know many of you were listening as you were still working, and certainly a lot of you didn't get time off. I was up in Ohio, in Columbus, met a lot of fantastic Clay and Buck listeners who are both Michigan and Ohio State fans. Had a fantastic time up at that game, but everybody behind the scenes and the Fox Sports production crew working. I know that many of you were working throughout the holiday season as well, so thank you for everyone who kept the country rolling and managed to not get a break, and we certainly are thankful for all of you and everything that you do for us. But, Buck, I know we played Dr. Fauci's final goodbye from the White House, and the long goodbye has continued. And to me, the biggest story coming out of the weekend is protests that are occurring right now in China. And those protests are against COVID lockdowns. While much of the world has moved on, China has remained committed to the draconian Dr. Fauci-led idea, effectively. This is what Fauci would have done if he had had total control in America of COVID zero. And finally, that is the idea that anytime you have COVID positive cases, you shut down entire areas. Buck, we played the audio, if you remember, felt very dystopian of the drones that were flying around telling people basically to abandon all hope and remain. I believe that was in Shanghai.
Do not give in to your heart's desire for freedom, was what the drones were saying, yes.
And so you and I and everybody out there knows that protesting in America, you get to go on social media and put up a hashtag and put up a flag and, you're so heroic, you're a social justice warrior. If anything, it helps your overall credibility. It certainly doesn't, by and large, harm you, especially if you're engaged in left-wing protests. In China, things are different. It requires a lot more bravery, and many people in China right now are out in the streets, and they are holding up white sheets of paper to symbolize a belief in freedom of speech and an attack on censorship from the Chinese government. And we're going to play you some audio, but I just want you to think about this, Buck, because it puts our friends on the left wing in this country in an incredibly untenable position. Because either they have to condemn the Chinese Communist government for not allowing people to make basic decisions about their personal autonomy, their freedom in their life, or they have to acknowledge that also COVID lockdowns, COVID shutdowns didn't work, because there are many people in this country, including Dr. Fauci, who still point to China as an example of a country that got everything, in their opinion, right about COVID. They envy the idea of lockdowns, of shutdowns, of barricading people inside their homes and not allowing them to leave until the virus is snuffed out. And so it has become increasingly untenable. Even places like New Zealand and Australia, which were police states in many ways associated with COVID, have abandoned this idea. And now China is standing alone. So your thoughts as you watch these protests emerge, Buck, and also on their degree of untenability in terms of the challenges they put forward for the lockdown proponents like Fauci, who still would shut down this country.
I mean, I'm not hopeful, as some are right now, that this is going to be the end of Xi Jinping, that this is going to overthrow the communist regime. Truly authoritarian governments, not semi-wannabe like we had here during COVID, but the real deal, which certainly communist China is, they spend most of their time and energy and security resources on that issue of how do we stay in charge no matter what. They're not worried about elections. They're not worried. It's just how do we stay in charge. So it's very, very hard. You've seen this for decades now in Iran. Every time, and the Iranians recently even were out in the streets protesting. And every time there's a moment we say, oh, wouldn't it be great if this was the time that the Iranian mullahs, that the theocracy of Iran was gone. And it so far, it's been, since 1979, hasn't happened. So I'm not hopeful that this will be, I should say, I don't expect. Hope is one thing, but expecting is another. But the Biden administration response to this for a lot of people should be eye-opening because exactly what you were just saying and what we have been saying here now for the entire time we've been doing this show together is that the Democrats, if they could have gotten away with much more severe lockdowns, they would have pushed much more severe lockdowns. That they thought the Chinese and even the Australian version was just the lighter version of what they did in China. But in Australia, they were sending people to quarantine camps. All idiocy. Every public health official, every doctor, every government employee who did that should feel ashamed, but they don't. But the Biden administration, Clay, let's remember the reason the protests really broke out, and what sparked them, if you will, in this case. The reason that these protests are happening is that they've been under lockdown for months. COVID is at a all-time high in some regions of China in terms of cases, and they just had 10 people burned to death in a quarantined building, effectively quarantined, in Xinjiang province in the west of China. They weren't allowed to leave the building, there are reports. It was, oh, your building's on fire, stay in the building. And when that sort of thing happens, people have to wake up, no matter how dense the propaganda has been. And in that environment, here is what did you see this, what the Biden White House put out?
Yeah, it's tepid and flaccid and weak like we would expect from them.
We've said, this is the Biden White House, that zero COVID is not a policy we pursue here in the United States. And as we've said, we think it's going to be very difficult for the People's Republic of China to be able to contain this virus through their zero COVID strategy. For us, we are focused on what works, and that means using the public health tools like yada, yada, yada. That's the best they can do. China is a giant, it's a giant virus concentration camp effectively right now in some parts of it. They're just herding people into homes. If you leave, you go to prison, and perhaps worse. And the best the Biden administration can do is, well, that's not what we're doing here. It's almost like Biden doth protest too much. Like, well, yeah, we know you're not doing that here, but you kind of want to, don't you?
Yeah, and let's remember, Dr. Fauci said earlier this year that he was in favor of what China had done for their renewed lockdowns. This is a flashback. Listen to Fauci praise China. This is cut 2.
Their complete lockdown, which was their approach, a strictest lockdown that you'd never be able to implement in the United States. Although that prevents the spread of infection, and remember early on, they were saying, and I think accurately, that they were doing better than almost anybody else. But lockdown has its consequences. You use lockdowns to get people vaccinated so that when you open up, you won't have a surge of infections. The problem is that the vaccines that they've been using are not nearly as effective as the vaccines that are used in the United States, the UK, EU, and other places.
That's not even true, by the way. Side note, how much better is our vaccine than theirs, Clay? Well, ours doesn't work, so not that much better.
And also, let's note what Fauci is doing there. He's changing the rationale for lockdowns. We locked down. People forget this. But it was 15 days to stop the spread. The idea was we were going to keep, if you can take yourself back so far into the past to remember the initial rationales, because they changed the storyline so much in every aspect. 15 days to stop the spread, if I'm remembering correctly, Buck, was only about keeping our hospitals from getting overwhelmed.
Yes.
That was the pitch that they made, was we have to do this because otherwise we won't be able to serve everyone.
You know how in some of these true crime shows and other things, they'll talk about instances where they'll show that somebody at gunpoint or whatever it may be got into the trunk of the car. And anybody will tell you, any law enforcement professional, anybody will tell you, the moment they say get in the trunk of the car, it's go time. If you have to take a bullet in the shoulder, it doesn't matter. You never get in the trunk because then you are utterly helpless. And they may just leave you in the trunk. I know it's horrible, right? But you never get in the trunk. 15 days to slow the spread. was the American people getting in the trunk. Then the Fauciite apparatus had us. We were at their whim. We had already given in. They could extend it. They could drive us to a second location and a third location. They could do whatever they wanted to us. And that's why they sold it under those false pretenses. They never really, I don't believe that Fauci and Birx really thought it was ever going to be 15 days. The more I thought about this, it was just, come on, just this one time. You can trust me. Just get in the trunk. I promise I don't want to hurt you. We got in the trunk. It was the wrong move. And I fell for it, too, insofar as I figured, look, 15 days, they say the hospitals are all going to be overrun. As soon as we had the data that showed that hospitals were never overrun. This was never a thing that even happened. Not once. Not once.
And Buck, you were in New York at the time. I obviously was here in Nashville. So many people, that is the biggest flaw of the Trump administration. Okay, if you want to go back, and I and Buck did, and we all agree that Trump did a lot of really good things for this country in 4 years. His acquiescence, his willingness to go along with 15 days to stop the spread, essentially put in place the lockdown apparatus that never really left in many parts of the country for years. And I saw the other day where Gavin Newsom, did you see this tweet from Gavin Newsom? Because I know he said he's not going to run in 2024.
I was going to bring that up a little bit later, Clay.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. But I saw this tweet from Gavin Newsom, and I didn't respond to it, but I have it in my drafts. Gavin Newsom said that the Republican version of freedom, ban books, limit speech, live in fear of gun violence, take away your health care decisions. Gavin Newsom arrested people for paddleboarding in the ocean, Buck. He removed rims from basketball goals, put crime scene tape up on playgrounds, and filled in skate parks with sand. I just hit reply finally. I remember that I had saved that in drafts. But there's been no reckoning. And when we come back, I want to play the audio maybe a little bit later in this hour because we need to. I think this is so significant. Fauci was doing his continued media availability. Hopefully he's going to ride off into the sunset somewhere, and I would be happy if that could happen literally, by the way, because he's not going to go to jail probably, but that's where he belongs. But if Fauci and all of the Fauciites are refusing to acknowledge that they got anything wrong, there's no reckoning, but more importantly, it means they still are empowered to potentially try this again if another variant of COVID emerges.
Yeah, of course. They're still talking about this again. People forget in the early days, I remember this in New York City because nobody was in their cars. There was a little bit of talk of, wow, imagine if we did these lockdowns for climate. I remember people were talking about that. That wasn't some crazy theoretical. It was, imagine if we could all unite to save the world from climate. They're not done with this. And by the way, on the Gavin Newsom thing, it really is like he read 1984 and took all the wrong lessons from it, or maybe all the right lessons because he just wants to be a tyrant. Freedom is slavery. War is peace. Peace is war. I'm flipping things around. California is the totalitarian nanny state future of America if the libs are not held in check. And he acts like they're pro-freedom. It's completely insane. And COVID is just one example of this. Let's come back. We'll do Fauci on opening up schools. And whether they should, he's not saying too much about too much. Clay, he's keeping his options open. He's also going to be on CNN and MSNBC, probably CBS News as a contributor, one of them after he leaves. Guaranteed. They're not done with the little Fauci doll. It's not too late, my friends, to get a better deal on your monthly cell phone bill. I know Black Friday just happened, but you can still save big bucks. You switch from Verizon, T-Mobile, or AT&T and save more than 50% every month when you sign on with Pure Talk. It's the cell phone company I've switched to and never given it a second thought because it has been phenomenal. Pure Talk operates on the same network and the same towers as the big guys, giving you the same quality of service. Difference with Pure Talk is you're saving 50% or more every month because you're not paying for retail stores or fancy sponsors. What you do get is unlimited talk, text, and plenty of data for just $30 a month. With that kind of pricing, the average size family on a Pure Talk plan is saving almost $1,000 a year. Switch today and save 50% off your first month and get 30 days risk-free. Switching can take just 10 minutes with Pure Talk's U.S.-based customer service team. Using your cell phone right now, dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck, and you'll save 50% off your first month. Again, dial pound 250, say Clay and Buck, and make the switch to Pure Talk.
Truth seeking, reality telling. The Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our friggin' health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great.
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley Podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley Podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley Podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You see, Fauci doesn't ever want to give you up. Fauci doesn't want to say goodbye.
Well played.
You know, he's never going to give you up. He's going to be out there telling you, hold on, I have crunched the latest figures, and the data on the masking suggests that maybe, perhaps, an additional mitigation measure. It's going to be 2050. How will Fauci still be kicking and screaming then? I don't know, but he will. It'll be 2050, and Fauci's going to be running around telling you to do this. Here...
No, I was just going to say, heads up, we're going to talk to Eric Schmidt, who deposed Fauci. I believe he was in the room for 7 hours. Former Missouri Attorney General, now going to be a senator from Missouri. I am fascinated to hear. Supposedly, Buck, did you see this story? Fauci got mad because the court stenographer, the person taking down the deposition, sneezed, and he went off on her because of the dangers of COVID.
Okay, well, we have to hear that. I thought maybe she was writing in a description and said strange Smurf in lab coat or something, but apparently not. Here is Fauci. First of all, I love this. Margaret Brennan, why be a stenographer for the regime? Like, you're already being overpaid to be essentially a news reader. Why not actually, stand up for the truth for 1 second? Ask a real question of evil little Fauci doing what he does here. She asks him about schools. Anyone who thinks schools should be closed at this point for COVID has a mental illness, not a viral illness. And this is Fauci's non-response response. Play 1.
So coming out of the holidays, should parents expect schools to shut down?
I don't know, Margaret. I'm not sure. When you talk about shutting down schools, there's always the collateral
That's also
effects.
Radioactive.
It is, exactly. There's always the collateral issue. So you have to balance, and you do it in real time, depending upon the viral load of disease in your region. So you have to have the local authorities evaluate on a situation-by-situation basis the potential collateral deleterious effects with the effects of what might happen if you have so many kids getting infected.
Okay, he is so horrible. There are not potential deleterious effects. There are proven severe deleterious effects, especially for low-income and disproportionately minority students. And Clay, there is no benefit. This is the whole problem.
I can speak for every parent out here, too. When you suddenly become aware that your kids can't go to school, it's a full-on scramble. And I know there are still parents, moms in particular, who bear the overwhelming amount of responsibility for childcare. The fact that Fauci's answer to this question, Buck, and this is so significant, I think we need to continue to talk about this when we come back, and we can open up phone lines on it, too, isn't we should never shut down schools for COVID again. In retrospect, we never should have shut them down in the first place, is a sign that they refuse to acknowledge that they got this 100% wrong and therefore will take advantage of the opportunity to shut down again if they can. It's all about their power. I want to tell you, speaking of getting your kids educated with a different way of thinking, right now you can get a 50% discount on the Tuttle Twins Cyber Monday deal. These are activities for both younger and older kids. Kids aren't learning the basics about free market and the importance of American history. Tuttle Twins have sold over 4 million copies of their books because they make it easy for kids and teens to understand and learn important concepts. Parents have been blown away, including this parent, what their kids can learn from these books. They'll be able to navigate, understand concepts like inflation and how business and money work in the real world. Go to TuttleRadio.com right now to access this special deal. That's TuttleRadio.com for 50% off the free market economic curriculum. TuttleRadio.com. One more time, TuttleRadio.com.
Clay Travis and Buck Sexton on the front lines of truth.
Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. You just heard the audio of Fauci. And I understand that many of you are so over Fauci. And some of you just say, well, there probably are Republicans out there that say, well, I kind of agree with The Atlantic. We should just give amnesty. We just got to stop talking about this. No, no, no. There has to be a reckoning. There has to be accountability for what our, and I'm using quotation marks here, experts did to us as it pertains to COVID. And it's not just what they did to us. This is very significant. Dr. Fauci is still not acknowledging that he was completely wrong on everything. You heard that question on Face the Nation, Buck. A honest person who looked at data would say to you, you know what? Early on in March of 2020, we thought that shutting down schools would have a substantial impact on limiting the spread of COVID. We were wrong. The negative impacts of kids being kept out of school also was massive. And so if you balance the equities here, schools should not shut down for COVID ever again. We were wrong on that. And in the fog of the early days of COVID, that was an error we made. I wish I could go back in time and change that. I wouldn't suddenly like Fauci, but I would at least respect him for looking at the data and reassessing. Buck, sports analogy. I was at the Michigan-Ohio State game. I picked the Buckeyes to win. I'm sorry to bring this up for all of our listeners in Cleveland, Columbus, and Cincinnati, 3 cities where I believe we are number one in listenership. I know you're still grieving. But if Ryan Day, the head coach of Ohio State, at his Monday morning press conference came out and somebody said, hey, you've watched the film now. What do you think? You lost at home by 22 to Michigan in the biggest game of your year. And Ryan Day said, you know what? We did everything exactly right. I wouldn't change anything in that game. They would fire him on the spot. They would. Because we demand accountability from football coaches when they get their ass whipped. How do we not demand accountability of Dr. Fauci when he created the worst bureaucrat-led disaster in American history with what he did in response to COVID?
Do you know what the complete absence, you could say the death of accountability looks like? Communist China. What they're doing there right now. In fact, the truly ultimate ends of the eradication of all accountability for decision-making would be North Korea, where it doesn't matter. People starve to death. It doesn't matter. I think the American people, if they had some better sense, I mean, I'll ask you this. Clay, did you learn in school, and I don't say this, I didn't learn in school more than I think a few lines in a history textbook, maybe in high school, high school history of the world or something, about the Great Famine in China. Never mind what caused it, which was just socialist policy.
Nothing.
But 40 to 60 million people died. This wasn't 100 years ago.
I don't remember ever hearing a word about it in school. Not one word.
So this is 40 to 60 million people died in, our grandparents' memory. I mean, this isn't that long ago. And or, you know, it depends. Some people listening would say, well, my parents' memory, even they remember this. It wasn't reported on very much then. The same Chinese Communist Party that used hunger as a weapon after the massively stupid policies that destroyed effectively the ability for the Chinese to even feed themselves. And that's the destruction of all accountability. Here is a CNN reporter out there at these Chinese protests, and all of a sudden you're hearing, what does it sound like when you're at total desperation because of government malfeasance? It's the largest country in the world right now. Play clip 5.
I'm in the center of a protest in Beijing right now. They're chanting that they don't want COVID tests. They want freedom. They've been chanting this for hours. People have gathered here in the center of Beijing to protest the COVID measures. We are in Taoyang district. This is the city center. This is also where the authorities have urged people to stay at home because the COVID outbreak is severe here. Now, the area is also important because this is where the American embassy is over there. There are many foreign embassies over here. There is a heavy police presence. I am surrounded by police. They're telling me to shift in a little bit. And if we just turn the camera around, you'll see there is a row of police. There is mostly young people who have gathered here. And many people
So,
are
Clay,
also
two things on this that I want people to hear, that because understand that, and you started out talking about this. One, every person who's out there protesting this, holding up a white sheet of paper, they risk imprisonment, torture, mutilation, and possible death. Every single one of them, because that's how communist China actually deals with people that speak out against the regime. People were actually chanting that Xi Jinping needs to go, which, I mean, they will kill people for that in China. That's how vicious and authoritarian it is. And when we talk about why COVID was such a window into the soul of, or the soullessness of authoritarianism, Clay, this is happening today in the second biggest economy in the world, in the largest country by population in the world. And everyone in America just wants to go, like, you know, people want to, not everyone, but people want to say, oh, you know, we can forget all about COVID. No, we absolutely cannot forget about what they did and what they still are doing.
And what they still will do in the future if they have the opportunity. And that's why that Fauci answer is unacceptable. And I just want you to think, the analogy, sometimes you can go to sports and you'll say, yeah, if a football coach came out after getting his ass kicked in a game and was asked, hey, what would you do different? And he said, well, you know, really, I wouldn't do anything different. He'd get fired on the spot. They would fire Ryan Day at Ohio State right now. I legitimately believe that. If he said, hey, I went back and watched the film, we did everything exactly right, I wouldn't change anything about that game. Well, you lost by 22. How can Fauci still be going on CBS and giving out not only the same talking points, Buck, but giving cover? Because this is important, too. Fauci always says, well, I didn't tell the schools to shut down. No. There's no one who actually would own the choice. This is why Ron DeSantis is so popular right now. Because he said, this is my choice. I'm making this decision. Look at what happens, Buck. The CDC comes out with recommendations, right? Masking, school closures, whatever it is. And they say, we're not telling you to do this, but we're recommending you to do this. And then all these stupid idiot school boards, they all had their meetings and they would say, well, the CDC's recommending this, so we're going to defer to the CDC authority. And they just ended up in this circular pattern where no one ever said, I made this choice. Right. This is me. I own it.
This is, all of a sudden, the CDC and this whole process, it was when the airline has kept you on the tarmac 3 hours, canceled your flight, screwed everything up. And it's like, well, you can't get mad at anyone, right? You're not allowed to get mad at it. There's no accountability. And that's exactly what we've had all along with COVID. Can I just tell you, New York City mayor's office just put this tweet out today. 18,319,000 vaccine doses administered, 80 new hospitalizations, 2,000 new cases. Get tested, get vaccinated, more data. They're living in a parallel universe. They're refusing to learn the most basic. So it's, when we're talking about this, it's not like it's just, theoretically this could be a problem. There already are some of these markers and indicators right now. I've been on flights recently where there have been a whole bunch of people with the tightly affixed N95 too. I mentioned this with the rubber bands. That's the next level now. It has to be like sort of cutting into the back of your head a little bit because it's so tightly affixed. And then you're someone who takes the virus seriously.
Buck, what about the fact that if you're in Washington, D.C. right now, they are demanding that you return to school today on a Monday with a lot of kids going back. I got 3 back in school today. You got to get a negative COVID test in order to be able to go back to school in Washington, D.C. public schools. What kind of insanity is this? The kids have zero risk. This is our third Thanksgiving since COVID started. And in order to be able to return to public school in our nation's capital, you have to get a negative COVID test. These people are truly broken. And when Fauci keeps giving them cover, when he keeps refusing to acknowledge, hey, you know what, we got this all wrong, he's like the football coach who got his ass kicked and refuses to look at the film and pretends that they won the game. They're selling completely false narratives to the public, and a lot of the media is just gullibly lapping it up and not even asking a question about it.
People would rather be
fired up.
I mean, and by the way, we're going to talk about the crime situation because, I'm in New York in particular. I'm so fired up about this. But what you're seeing are a lot of people that make decisions who would rather pretend to be right and have good people suffer and continue to suffer than accept that they made mistakes and take responsibility for them. This is a plague on its own all across the country on COVID policy, but on crime policy with Democrats, too.
No doubt. We'll talk about that and more. In the meantime, hey, you know what? Coming back from the holiday, first part of the holiday, we still got Christmas and New Year's coming up. And I bet maybe a lot of you are looking at your credit card bill saying, oh, my goodness, what in the world happened? And you know what you also end up doing? A lot of times buying gifts that people don't actually like. How about getting something that somebody actually wants and can make them more productive? That's the X Chair. Biggest sell of the year is here on Cyber Monday. No excuse not to go get yourself an X Chair. With a deal this good, you could get X Chairs for everyone on your Christmas list if you wanted to, because they're offering up to $600 off. Buck and I have these chairs. You can get them $600 off yourself, including a free heat and massage unit, only now through today. Monday, November the 28th, that's today, Cyber Monday. Don't miss the chance to buy the most luxurious, the most comfortable, the most supportive, the most fashionable, the most ergonomic, and the most amazing office chair anywhere while saving up to $600. Here's how you do it. Only available today. Go check it out on Cyber Monday. Go to xchairclay.com right now. That website is easy. xchairclay.com right now. You can save $600. It's where I'm writing my brand new book. It's where Buck is sitting. It can make a fantastic difference for you too. xchairclay.com. $600 off today alone. xchairclay.com. Do it. $600 off today.
Get to know the guys outside the issues. Sunday Hang with Clay and Buck, a new podcast. Find it on the iHeart app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our friggin' health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley Podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley Podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley Podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Clay and Buck. You know, we mentioned this just before. What do you do when all the data shows you that something is going the wrong way? When all the numbers, all the facts you can bring to bear show that the trend is negative and the people making the decisions just don't care? We have had this with COVID, as you know. Vaccines don't really work. They don't care. Masks don't really work. Clay just pointed out to me that China is censoring, and I'd seen this tweet or this in Twitter over the weekend. Oh, another thing. Oh, Twitter's going to shut down, they say, when you get rid of all these woke, blue-haired, very sad, angry, nasty employees who cry a lot when they don't get their way. Twitter's better than Twitter's more fun than it's ever been.
Yes.
Boy, I've added like 80,000 people to my Twitter following in the last 40 days.
Yeah.
That usually, I mean, this is crazy. Oh, all of a sudden, you mean people can actually just like what they like and read what they want to read? What a shock. So that's all the data shows that what we've said about Twitter is true. All the data shows that what they've been doing on COVID is a nightmare. We'll come back to Twitter as well because it's fascinating what is happening there. And Elon Musk is... he's not tired of winning. That's all I got to say right now.
Yeah.
He's not tired of winning. And you got on the crime issue, you see this all over the place. I talk about New York a lot. We've got a great audience and a growing audience as well out in Portland listening on KEX. And Clay and I want to at some point head out there. We might just head out there for a fun weekend. We'll just go hang, see some folks. But in Portland, you have a business owner here just talking about a business closing down after 15 break-ins to the same business. Play 13. Oh, do we have clip 13? Going once.
You're focusing on the 15 break-ins I've had after hours, but I've had countless other very dangerous interactions with my employees and criminals and, mentally ill or drug addicted people coming into the space. Nobody's going to go after these guys. And therein lies the problem, is that the criminal behavior, they know it will not be punished. So that is why, I had the last 5 break-ins were within 24 days. They knew nobody's getting caught. This is fine.
Clay, this is the reality in so many places in major cities across America. All the data shows, and I want to get into what they're doing in New York because it is the people that are supposed to enforce criminal law. What they're doing, in my mind, should be criminal. The complete abdication of law and order. This is a Democrat mindset, and there's the same mania. I mean, the same manic. Doesn't matter what the data is. It's like they're on some quest, and this is just the suffering. They have this with COVID. They have this with crime. No sane person could look at what Democrats in charge in these places are doing and think that it's not making the situation worse, and they don't care. I mean, Karen Bass just beat out Caruso in Los Angeles. Karen Bass is going to make everything worse.
Yes. That's the real threat to democracy, is when leaders make poor choices and they aren't held accountable for those poor choices. And when they even refuse to acknowledge that they've made errors and continue to march down the same path that they're already on. You hinted at this, but I think it's kind of a perfect metaphor. And unfortunately, it feels like something that's going on in the United States, too. China, for all World Cup matches, is refusing to show crowds in the stands. They are editing out. So FIFA puts out one feed, the same feed that you watch in the United States, you see in Mexico, you see in Saudi Arabia, everywhere. They have one camera crew that puts out the game. China is delaying the arrival of the World Cup matches in their country and editing out any footage that shows fans not wearing masks in the stands in Qatar because they don't want their citizens to realize how the rest of the world has gone back to living normally while they remain under COVID lockdowns. In some ways, Buck, it feels like that is a reflection of what the left wing in this country is trying to do with COVID, in that they are using their allies in the media, as you heard with that Dr. Fauci interview, to refuse to acknowledge that they got anything wrong and not be held accountable for those failures. And unfortunately, those same failures may, as a result, come back because we haven't seen a true reckoning on those failures of leadership.
It's remarkable that, I mean, you look at Florida and what happened with Ron DeSantis's Florida red wave. Totally accurate to call it a red wave here in Florida. 20-point win for governor is completely mind-blowing to a lot of people when that happened. I thought 10 points, and that would have been a huge wave. 20 points is a but he did the things here that were based on data, and the people of Florida benefited from that. And every other leader of every other state and every other city should see that and say, oh, wow, yeah, this is a lot better for the people, but they won't do it. They don't care. And they convinced everybody threats to democracy and big scary Trump was enough to prevent any accountability on crime, on the economy, on the border, and on COVID in a lot of these states. And it's just sad. They're going to keep suffering.
Well, and I think DeSantis is reaping the benefits of, first of all, being right by and large on everything on COVID, but also saying, I'm making these choices. Ultimately, that's what elected leaders have to do. We elect them to make choices. We don't elect them to decide to defer to public health experts, and again, all of that is in quotation marks, who are unelected and have no actual consequences for their opinions. I want someone who is actually on the ballot to be making these choices. We can't vote out Fauci, unfortunately. He's the highest paid taxpayer-funded employee in the country, the worst bureaucrat ever, but he's not on the ballot. These other people are. That's significant. We're going to talk about that and more as we continue to roll on here on Clay and Buck.
Clay Travis and Buck Sexton on the front lines of truth.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our friggin' health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. Encourage all of you to go subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you don't miss a moment. We're coming up on Christmas, the holiday season, and New Year's, all of that rolling in together, no matter where you may be. We want you to be able to find us and listen to us everywhere. And so you can search out my name, Clay Travis. You can search out Buck Sexton. Boom. Also encourage you, given the battles that Elon Musk is currently fighting, now's the time to go sign up for a Twitter account. If you haven't already, you can find me at Clay Travis. You can find Buck Sexton at Buck Sexton there. And you can also find our next guest, Gordon Chang, at Gordon G. Chang on Twitter. He is a columnist and author. His books, The Coming Collapse of China and the Great U.S.-China Tech War. Gordon, thank you for taking the time to join us. If you were advising the Biden White House. We saw their tepid comment and response yesterday about the protests that are emerging in China surrounding zero COVID. What would you tell the Biden White House is the best possible way to support these protesters as they fight back against Chinese authoritarianism?
Well, thanks, Clay. And what I would say is that President Biden should publicly and privately tell the Chinese that the United States will impose severe consequences on China should the regime use force against protesters. Those words yesterday from Admiral Kirby, the NSC coordinator, and in Biden's statement were really disheartening, dispiriting, because if the United States doesn't defend freedom and democracy, then no country in the world will. And it's not just our effect on China. It's also the effect on other countries around the world where they see we don't defend our values.
Gordon and Buck, can you just give everybody some sense of how long and how extreme China's lockdowns have been? Because the way the Biden administration has spoken about it, it seems to be like, well, that's not our policy, and it's probably going to be hard for them to make it work. It seems like there's some pretty extreme video, even by the standards of what we'd expect in China, that's been coming out of some of these lockdowns. What has it been like?
Well, just to give you an example, on Thursday night there was a fire in an apartment block in Urumqi, and there were reported 10 killed. Most people think it's somewhere between 40 and 50 died. People died, Buck, because some were actually in their apartments and could not get out because the doors were wired shut on the outside. Now, there have also been reports, which are true, because we've seen the video, of people being welded into their apartments. And that is how extreme the zero COVID policy is, that people are not allowed to leave their apartments for food or for anything else if they're under quarantine.
Gordon, how does this end for China? I mean, and what I mean by that is it doesn't seem like they're going to get enough natural immunity from COVID based on the zero COVID policy. We know that the COVID shots, no matter which one you take, does not keep you from getting or spreading COVID. So I don't see a pathway out of this for Chairman Xi. What is the ultimate way that China handles COVID, given that they are effectively on a zero COVID island now and even attempting to implement this policy?
I think that essentially the Communist Party falls because, as you point out, and you're absolutely correct about that, Clay, there is no way out for China. They are going to maintain zero COVID for a variety of reasons. That has already undermined the economy severely. We're seeing not only very poor economic growth, if there's any growth at all, but there's also been plunging property prices and a falling currency, and those are indirect results of zero COVID. China is losing fast its status as the world's factory floor because zero COVID rules have prevented China from not only manufacturing product, but also getting it to ports and on ships for sailing. So really this has been, I think, going to be the end of the Communist Party. Maybe not this week, but the Chinese people who were demonstrating over the weekend were saying down with the Communist Party, and they're eventually going to win because there's a lot more of them than there are of party members.
Okay, so you say they're eventually going to win, and that's a heck of a prediction. I know you've written about it. What's the time frame of a Communist Party collapse in China look like in your mind?
Well, I've been wrong on that, so probably I'm the worst person in the world to ask. But just to give you some context, I wrote a book in 2001 saying that the Communist Party would fall in a decade. In my defense, Clay, I will say I didn't foresee the 2008 downturn, but that's a longer story, which we don't have time to get into. But I think that we're talking about a 2 or 3 year time frame, maybe even less than that, because the Chinese people right now are talking about getting rid of Xi Jinping, and that is stunning. I didn't expect that. And it's those protests that sprung up after the fire on Thursday. Remember, those protests across China, north, south, east, west, they weren't organized. They weren't coordinated. There was no leadership. It's just the people want change.
Gordon, when regimes, we're speaking to Gordon Chang, everybody, the Great U.S.-China Tech Wars, his latest book. Also, at Gordon G. Chang on Twitter is his Twitter handle. which we all are big fans of Twitter these days because it's a place where you actually can share your thoughts. Yay. Gordon, when regimes are under pressure, obviously repression follows in the case of a country that is a totalitarian dictatorship like China. But there's also always the possibility of some kind of external military operation, some effort to unite the population behind, the motherland, so to speak, because of a ongoing conquest or invasion, which brings us to Taiwan. What do you think the Chinese Communist Party's aims are right now with regard to Taiwan? And are you concerned about the U.S.'s willingness or even capability to do anything about it?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that Xi Jinping will think that he can distract the Chinese people from his obvious policy mistakes at home and try to unite them by creating some military misadventure abroad. Taiwan is an obvious candidate, so Philippines and Japan as well. And, it doesn't really matter. What we're talking about is the ability of the United States to defend. And with regard to Taiwan, Biden personally, you can tell from his 4 media interviews where he actually said, yes, I will defend Taiwan militarily. But we've seen his administration walk back his comments, which not only constitute a constitutional crisis in the U.S., that's because the White House press secretary is not charged by the Constitution with making foreign policy, but also, the Chinese see the disarray. And even if the administration is willing to defend Taiwan, and I tend to think they will, I believe that China believes they won't. And what China believes is really very, very important because they're the actor in this. So, yes, we need to be very concerned. And the other thing, Buck, we have a Pentagon, we have a Biden administration that has no sense of urgency about what's going on. And so the Chinese can take us by surprise.
Gordon, a lot of times people think of an invasion as a sign of strength. But if you look at the population in China, for example, it's probably already peaked. The one China policy is going to end up being a disaster. They're now trying to get people to have 2 or 3 children. But over the next couple of generations, by the way, most Chinese are not doing that, even though they can. Over the next couple of generations, the Chinese population could get cut in half. How much of China wanting to attack and invade Taiwan is about weakness as opposed to strength? And how do we psychologically analyze Chinese motivation based on that knowledge?
Yeah, I think Xi Jinping is seeing a closing window of opportunity to achieve what he believes are historic goals, because you have the debt crisis, plunging property prices, crumbling economy, falling currency, worsening food shortages, deteriorating environment. I can go on. And clearly Xi Jinping has no answers to these because his policies are actually aggravating them. So, yeah, I do believe that there's a use it or lose it mentality. And so that's another thing which I think argues for a Chinese invasion sooner rather than later. And by the way, there are 2 Chinese demographers last fall that actually predicted that China's population would fall in half within 45 years.
Gordon, is there any off-ramp that the Chinese Communist Party may have from him? You mentioned that they may just continue a zero COVID policy. Can't they realize at this point, given the protests, that this is, are they doing this just because they're addicted to totalitarian control, or do they still believe the science? It just seems somewhat unfathomable, right? It seems totally irrational, even for a totalitarian actor like the Chinese Communist Party, to think that locking people in their homes for months on end is going to do anything.
Yes. Yeah, they are addicted to totalitarian control, and they're addicted to something else. You've got to remember that the current ruler, Xi Jinping, reveres Mao. And Mao believed that China's communists could do anything in the world. They could conquer nature, they could do whatever. And so I think they believe that they can conquer SARS-CoV-2, the pathogen that causes COVID-19. So they believe that, and Xi Jinping generally believes that his will can accomplish anything. So that's another layer on a very dangerous mentality. So yeah, this is not something that people outside China is easy for them to fathom, because it is just so abnormal, so ludicrous. but that's what they believe, and that's what's important. That's what they believe.
Gordon, if we'd had this conversation in the 1980s, everybody was terrified of Japan. Japan was buying up all the property in the United States. The economy of Japan was white hot. The idea was Japan's taking over the world. Over the last 40 years, Japan has mostly been stagnant, and they fell apart in the late 80s. What does the future of China look like? Do you believe that China will become the biggest economy in the world? If they do, can they stay there? What does China look like in 40 years? If communism collapses, what replaces it? You mentioned the demographics. I'm fascinated by it. The demographics of potentially the Chinese population being cut in half. We know Japan is declining its population, aging rapidly. The same thing's going to happen in China. How does this end?
It certainly doesn't end with the Chinese dominating the world. I graduated college. I'm going to date myself here. I graduated college during the Arab oil embargo, and I just knew that I was going to be working for some sheikh for the rest of my life. So when the Japanese at the end of the 1980s looked like that they were going to own planet Earth, I said, I don't know how this ends, but it's not going to end that way because I'm not working for some Arab. And the same thing with China. China in 40 years, I think, is going to be a weak country. Could very well be divided, cut up. Who knows where it's going to be? But it's not going to be ruling the world. And it's not just demography. It is everything else. That is, all these crises are hitting China at the same time. And it would be a challenge for any group of leaders, but it's certainly a challenge for a Maoist who has lost touch with the world as it is.
Gordon Chang, this is fantastic stuff. At Gordon S. Chang on Twitter. Go follow him there. Thank him for coming on the show. Read his books. Gordon, we appreciate the time.
Thank you so much, Clay, and thank you so much, Buck.
Thank you, Gordon.
Great stuff.
By the way, I'm telling Gordon
you,
doesn't look a day over 40. By the way, what does it say? He graduated during the oil embargo? No way.
Yeah, no, he's aging a lot better than I am for sure. And I'm fascinated by all of the demographic data coming out of China and where we're headed. I think the Chinese government and the Chinese economy in general, I agree with Gordon, is way weaker than we're analyzing. And I don't know where it's headed, but I'm not as afraid of China in 10 years as I am right now because I think they're acting out of weakness, not strength.
Early on, remember, there were people who were concerned. There was this theory, and it was not correct, but there's a theory out there. Oh, well, China was trying to get ahead of us with COVID, and they're going to come out of it so much stronger than we are, and they're doing their lockdowns so much stronger, therefore they'll come out sooner, and they'll be so much better. Totally the opposite. Totally the opposite.
Yes.
So many people, the experts, the blue checks, were so wrong about COVID and still are so wrong about China.
And that's one reason they're not speaking out very much about these Chinese protests is because they would have to acknowledge that the lockdowns and the shutdowns, which they pointed to as a great strength of China, and, by the way, New Zealand and Australia, which have completely abandoned them, they're not really stepping out there because it requires acknowledgement
Here's
of the
problem
wrong
for Biden in the White House. If China's super strict lockdowns were utterly pointless and devastating, which they were, what were our half-ass lockdowns in this country, in New York, in L.A., and San Fran, and et cetera? What were they, Clay?
Oh, it's why they're not talking about it very much. I really do firmly believe it. The Tuttle twins, by the way, we were talking about educating your kids and making them aware of what's going on. Tuttle twins are extending their Cyber Monday deal into Cyber Week. This is the book publisher creating great educational books for kids. My own kids are reading these books because guess what? A lot of kids don't learn the basics about the free market. They don't learn the basics about American history. They learn the opposite of America's sterling record over time and being the shining country on a hill. Tuttle twins make it easy for kids and teens to learn these important concepts. They'll be able to navigate things like inflation, how business and money work in the real world. Heck, I wish the Biden administration was reading these. Parents have been blown away what their kids are able to grasp, all thanks to the Tuttle twins approach. Right now, 50% discount on the free market economy curriculum designed with activities for young and old kids. They've sold more than 4 million copies of their books to date, giving you an idea just how received and well received those books have been. Great gift for any young kid, any young student, whether it's your kids or your grandkids. Get hooked up now. Go to TuttleRadio.com for this special deal. TuttleRadio.com, 50% off the free market economic curriculum. Tuttle Radio, TravisandBuck.com.
Make an appointment with the truth. Tune in every day to the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our friggin' health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley Podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley Podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley Podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We follow very carefully our COVID-19 community levels. These are levels of infection that are circulating, severe disease that are coming into the hospitals, and how high our hospital levels are. How many beds are occupied by people with COVID-19? Very high levels in the Bronx and Queens, as you noted. And in those areas, we do specifically recommend masking. Also, lots of areas in New York with medium community levels and COVID-19 community levels. And again, there would recommend masking if you are at risk of severe disease, or if you're going to be around people at risk of severe disease.
Oh, yeah, just keep masking up. That's the CDC chief, Rochelle Walensky, who is lucky that Fauci exists because she gets so much less of our rage on the show. But she's really as bad as Fauci in a lot of ways, has been wrong just as much. She was the one who told you you won't get it, you won't spread it if you got the vaccine. She also is still defending vaccine mandates. We don't have time for that soundbite right this second, Clay, but I just want to point out they're not stopping. I mean, we look at the lockdowns in China. We go, how can they be so crazy? Well, we just have a slightly less crazy in this country.
If we didn't have federalism, we would have locked down just like Australia and just like New Zealand. And if we didn't have Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, we might well have done it otherwise. Because remember, DeSantis, Buck, was comfortable being the tip of the spear and taking all of the criticism for keeping Florida open. And then, to their credit, a lot of other Republican governors were willing to follow that lead. But my goodness, I don't know that I've ever been greater in my happiness for federalism than after what we just lived through. I can't imagine having been you, Buck, and having to live in New York City. I'm so fortunate that I lived in a red state where we basically never shut down. Sorry to bring it up again.
It's okay. It's a little bit of trauma there. But, Australia I always thought was like the UK with more sunshine, but it's East Germany with kangaroos. I mean, it really went nuts. Line. Sooner or later this holiday season, you're going to ask yourself what gift to get the person that seems to have everything already. And that answer is a gift from Legacy Box. This is the gift that keeps on giving because Legacy Box provides a simple and safe way to rediscover what's on old videotapes and films that have been stored away forever. This gift allows that person in your life to digitize their treasured videotapes, film reels, and photos so they can see them again and share them for the first time. And that last part is key in all of this because there's few greater pleasures than being able to share priceless moments and memories caught on film, tape, you name it. They have the ability to transfer it digitally. This is the time of year to work with Legacy Box. Their Cyber Week event gets you 65% off their regular pricing. They do all the digitizing, and they transfer it by hand in Tennessee. Go online to legacybox.com/buck. Get 60% off with that website, legacybox.com/buck. Lock it in now. It's a great gift for the holidays. legacybox.com/BUCK.
Welcome back, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. I am sitting here, as our Clay and Buck VIP members, I believe, can see, holding up my jersey. I am wearing a U.S. soccer jersey, as in a little bit less than 30 minutes, the United States is going to be playing Iran in a win-or-go-home scenario. If you are out there and you hate soccer ties and everything else, the United States has only two options. You win, or your season is over. Your World Cup is over. Win and you advance to the round of 16 for a knockout stage. Lose or tie, and your time in Qatar is over. So in about 30 minutes, I'm going to turn on the television, do my best not to react during the final hour of the program as we do this show. And also, Buck is trying to avoid, I believe, the score. So that's the sports aspect.
Does anybody think that Clay is going to keep a poker face on while because I don't think any of us believe Clay gets so excited over the big sports ball events. So this is going to be a fun thing to watch him. He's like, I'm going to watch him with his face, his upper lip quivering just a little bit as he sees what's going on. But I'm going to watch it afterwards. And, I actually was at the World Cup I saw a match in 1994. My dad took me. So that was like
when they were
days.
in the United States.
Yes,
like that
in
was,
the US.
Where did you go to a game? In the New York area?
Giant Stadium. I remember it was like Morocco, and I forget who they were playing. I was young, I was a kid. I don't remember. But I did go with my high school soccer team to the World Cup in France in 1998. We had like a fundraiser. We'd like a walkathon or something. We raised money, and then the team went over there. And I saw Belgium play Holland, which is like those tiny countries next door both descended upon Paris, the whole countries, for that soccer match. It was pretty wild.
That is pretty cool. So now the game itself, obviously rooting for the United States against Iran. This is a big deal geopolitically too. We played yesterday on the program the Iranian propagandist, aka their media, grilling the United States players and coach and arguing, oh, you guys are not actually free, right? But this is pretty monstrous because Iran is in the middle, Buck, of a real sort of, I would say, vanguard uprising against their government over the way women are treated in that country. And so they have told the Iranian soccer team, and this is why I'm going to be watching irrespective of what happens in the game, there are reports that they have told the members of the Iranian soccer team that if they do not sing the national anthem, they are going to torture their family members back in Iran. So I want everyone out there to just think about this for a minute. We've had sports and politics colliding for years over the national anthem in this country. And what has ended up happening is the Colin Kaepernicks of the world have made millions of dollars by refusing to stand for the national anthem. In other words, our woke companies have actually rewarded them for their protest. In Iran, if you don't sing the national anthem, they are reportedly going to torture the family members of these soccer players. This is a different level of bravery. It's a different level of pressure. It's a different level of significance for all of these Iranian players who in the opening game of the World Cup did not sing the national anthem because they were supporting all of the women who are protesting in Iran for basic human rights, which they currently do not have.
Look, there's a lot of bad blood between the regimes, but a lot of solidarity between the people, our people and their people, at least those in Iran who want freedom. Our regime and the Iranian, our government and the Iranian regime obviously has had, in all senses, a deeply troubled and hostile, openly hostile relationship since 1979, since they took hostages at the U.S. Embassy. And the fact that this was such a big thing for Iran in 1994 when they beat the U.S. men's team 2-1 is partly indicative, I think, one, of they never get wins against the U.S., really. I mean, you look at the Iranian government's, it's a sclerotic kleptocracy of
Look at
mullahs.
you, Mr. Vocab.
That one just kind of flowed. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a bunch of dictators in clerical robes, and the economy is garbage, which it shouldn't be. The only reason they're able to fund their military and other government expenditures is because they have oil. If they didn't, the whole place would be in free fall collapse. The regime doesn't actually liberalize in meaningful ways. We keep going through these phases where we say, oh, maybe now it's a government of hardliners too. About a decade ago, there was a moment, they're going to moderate things. Remember the Obama administration, the Iran deal?
Yes.
We're going to bring them, normalize things with them. No, they just got crazier actually. So there's not also a whole lot else going on in the international scene for Iran. You know, there are people listening right now who are like, Buck, I don't even care. Clay, I don't even care about the U.S. men's national soccer team. In Iran, the whole country is going to watch. There's really nothing. There's no other game in town, so to speak. And this is their one opportunity to try to get some kind of a win on the world stage against the United States. And I also feel like, unfortunately, that creates all these, like, none of the U.S. players should feel geopolitical pressure.
You're right.
They should have the normal, like, we're Americans, we kick butt, like, go get them, guys. But they shouldn't feel geopolitical pressure to perform. But I think some of them are going to, because they realize, remember the axis of evil? This is part of the axis of evil, folks.
Well, and if the United States loses, there will be a celebration, the Death to America chants, the burning of the American flag. I'm sure will be taking place in Iranian streets, and that'll be encouraged by government propagandists. Buck, I don't think the Biden White House will do it, but it would be an incredible moment of bravery for our country to speak out and say that we will not allow Iran to attack the family members of the Iranian soccer team. Now,
I don't think we could follow through on. Unfortunately,
I don't think something we could.
I don't think we. I mean, look, that's the problem is that you're going to have these Iranian players at the mercy of this regime, and we don't have that many. We don't have that many levers in Iran. We don't even have diplomatic relations with Iran. We have to.
I think the only thing we can do is say, we're once and for all, we're done negotiating, and we're actually going to adopt. This is what we should do. We're actually going to adopt the Israeli perspective. The Israelis have been running roughshod over the Iranian nuclear program for some time. They've been sabotaging it. They've been executing high-level Iranian scientists. I think if the United States was actually being run in a honest and straightforward and trustworthy manner, we would just say that, right? We're done with all this ridiculous negotiations. You guys are terrorists. You are, as you said, kleptocrats using clerical robes to try to ruin a country and a people that actually overwhelmingly reject the validity of their rulers. And so we're going to actually go to war in a sense with you over your ability to get nuclear weapons. And Israel has basically said it. I don't know why we're pretending that we're not doing it. Just let that be known. And I hope we kick their ass in soccer.
I hope we beat them in soccer. I mean, the geopolitical side of this, there's some nuances and some other components. I mean, for one thing, Clay, we've been fighting various proxy wars against the Iranians for forever in the Middle East, really. I mean, stretching back certainly to 1979. They were going after us in Iraq, and then we went out, we killed Qasem Soleimani. I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth. So I don't, first of all, the Israelis about their operations don't talk about anything. That's their policy. So there's U.S. reporting or, Western reporting on what's happening to a nuclear scientist. The Israelis keep all that stuff real quiet, whatever they're doing or not doing. That's one part of this. But obviously everybody knows that there are open hostilities going on between Iran and Israel. The problem that I think is raised with what you're saying or, with the approach of why don't we just say this? Clay, the Democrat Party thinks that we're the problem with Iran. That's really the problem. They think we're the problem. So that's what I'm saying.
If we actually had honest policy, it would be great to just stand up and actually point out that that's not true.
Yeah, I mean, there are, if you walk around the streets of New York or LA or San Fran or Chicago or DC, not to mention a whole bunch of other places, and you just ask random passersby on the street who think they know about geopolitics, hey, we have a tough relationship with Iran. Whose fault is it? You get a lot of them be like, oh, it's American imperialism, and it's because, and some of them would even try to show off and be like, oh, it's because of what we did to with the Shah and Mossadegh. And, they start going back to the 1950s, 1960s. So they think it's our fault, Clay. That's the problem, and that's unfortunately half the country. The Blame America First caucus is alive and well on the Iranian issue.
Well, there's an obsession, obviously, based on who Trump is having dinner with the idea that Republicans are anti-Semitic. There's actually a hugely anti-Semitic portion of the Democrat base right now that refuses to stand up for Israel, that refuses to condemn many of these Middle Eastern countries for their clearly anti-Semitic behavior. I mean, even on Twitter, they still have Khomeini on Twitter, and I believe I'm correct, Buck, that he has basically said that the Jewish, attacked Jews regularly from his Twitter account. And of course, he's not banned. And to Elon Musk's
Clay,
credit,
but does Khomeini list his preferred pronouns?
Yeah.
Because, Twitter has rules, or at least it used to.
I don't think they're going to have any admirals who are transgender anytime soon in the Iranian military. Look, that game coming up soon, but it is a major geopolitical flashpoint, and it will be intriguing to see in about 15 minutes how that game begins and whether the Iranian players do or do not sing the national anthem of their country, and whether those threats of terror activity on behalf against their family are going to emerge. It's a story that may well pop in the next 15 minutes or so. Look, the shopping crush, both a blessing and a curse for small business owners. Visits to the post office, UPS store at the time of year, it takes forever. And it's oftentimes time that you just don't have to be standing there waiting to be able to ship packages. That's why Stamps.com is your solution. Not too late to get your holiday mailing and shipping under control with Stamps.com. Sign up now and you'll be printing your own postage in minutes. We are doing this in the Travis household. In fact, I need to get Buck's address for the Christmas card list. My wife was just saying, where are Buck and Carrie going to be living? I need their address. She's obsessed with the Christmas card list. All these stamps being printed out by Stamps.com. You can get started yourself with Stamps.com today. Sign up with the promo code Clay and Buck for a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a free digital scale. No long-term commitment or contracts to sign. Just go to Stamps.com, click the microphone at the top of the page, enter the code Clay and Buck. That's Stamps.com. Click the microphone at the top of the page. Enter the code Clay and Buck.
Two of the hardest voices to tell apart, but one unified voice when it comes to the truth. The Clay, Travis, and Buck Sexton Show.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our freaking health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Fauci is almost certain, not 99%, maybe 70, perhaps more like 52% sure that we did not, in fact, fund the Wuhan, that he did not, through a grant, through third party, fund the Wuhan research lab. Clay, you may have seen this one. I thought this was interesting. If you're Fauci, you've gotten everything wrong, you've lied about everything, and you're horrible, don't you just say, yeah, I'm certain we didn't fund it's one thing to say it didn't come from a lab, but here is little Fauci, who, reminder for everybody, he's going to be the preferred, you're going to have Fauci going on TV telling you about 4th of July fireworks safety at CNN for the next 5 years. He's going to be their guy. Just don't have it go kaboom in your hand. Here he is saying that, he's almost certain that the U.S. and he didn't fund the Wuhan lab that led to COVID. Play 6.
The investigation is going to be about specifically whether there's any connection, if there was a lab leak, to U.S. investments in virus research at the Wuhan lab. It's possible, right?
If you look at the viruses that the NIH funded, and it was a very small grant, $120,000, $130,000 a year, granting to study bat viruses in a surveillance way. Anybody who even has a peripheral understanding of evolutionary virology will tell you these viruses could not possibly turn into SARS-CoV-2. So when you talk about a leak, maybe there's a lab leak, but it's not with the viruses that the NIH was funding. That's almost certain that that's the case.
So, Clay, maybe they were just funding the institute that was doing the research, but it wasn't the specific grant. It wasn't the specific virus for that grant, but they were still sending checks to where I think we're going to find. I do believe it was created in a lab. I think we both believe that for a long time.
The evidence all supports that it was created in a lab, and I'm not claiming, nor are you, that we are virology experts, but it's almost like with a jury. When you are sitting on a jury, you're not an expert in murder if you're sitting in a murder trial, but you listen to all the evidence and determine what the most likely outcome is, and then render your verdict based on all of that data and all that evidence. There has been zero animal that I have seen, Buck, where they have been able to find an animal that appears to have had the original COVID outbreak. And given the fact that we know they were working with highly infectious diseases, literally at the Wuhan Virology Clinic, and that this happened to break out and become noticeable in Wuhan, all of the evidence, Occam's razor if you want to apply it. Also, I will say this, Buck. Do we really think that the Chinese are likely to have aggressively distinguished between where the money was being spent when it came to their virus research? In other words, if we're this is indefensible to me in the first place, the fact that American taxpayers are giving money in any way to create novel viruses in China, why are we funding Chinese research in the first place?
I also love he's like, it was only in a surveillance mode, so we weren't inviting the virus over for a couple of beers to watch the game. We were through glass in a petri dish looking at it going, how are you doing, virus? What's happening? Very different, Clay.
When Fauci says that he's almost certain something happened, Buck, I distrust this man so much that it makes me almost certain that it did happen. And let me just ask you this. If you were in charge of grants to the NIH and you had definitely given taxpayer-funded grants to the Wuhan Virology Institute, or however that place is called, would it surprise you if they were lying about this in general? And sorry to cut you off, Buck, but I'm watching right now. They are showing the Iranian national team is all singing the national anthem as they are being panned across right now as we are speaking.
So that's a news update. That's valid. That's valid, Mr. Clay Travis. But no goal scoring,
no goals,
reactions.
No.
So look. Anything that China does that is unethical, immoral, illegal, or, that's not surprising at all. But Fauci, we got to stay on the origins of COVID. You know, Clay, I want to talk about the Biden administration just kind of slipped this through right before the break. We're going to, be getting a bunch more oil from Venezuela, which is really interesting because I thought that they were so worried about climate change that we couldn't produce the oil here at home. But also, they're not willing to give a grant guarantee to the nearby country of Guyana in South America. I'll explain why this all actually matters a lot about commies, socialists, the media, libs, stuff like that.
Clay Travis and Buck Sexton on the front lines of truth.
The Monica Crowley podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our freaking health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome to today's edition of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show podcast.
Third hour of the Clay Travis and Buck Sexton Show starts right now, everybody. Thank you for rolling with us, as always. Oh, boy. There's some interesting situations playing out right now in the media. One of them, and I think the more we focus in on this, the more we're doing what they want us to do. But I don't want it to seem like we're avoiding this case, avoiding this situation. And it has to do with this dinner. I mean, Clay, you want to talk about this, right? This dinner at Mar-a-Lago with Trump. I will. You know what? I'll let you set it up, and then I want to give because my basic inclination to these things is I hate the do you denounce this person game. It's also like, people go every time you and I have been at Mar-a-Lago. Trump is like high-fiving and hanging out with people all over the place. There are literally hundreds of people that are coming and going. It is a club. Yes, it's a private club, but people bring guests and everything else. But I hate the do you denounce game because it's always really just a version of when did you stop beating your wife, right? But tell everybody what happened, just because I don't want us to get caught up in the why are you guys afraid to talk about it? Not afraid to talk about it, just not top of the list.
So, yes, let's start here. There are lots of times, Buck, where you or I, and we are way down on the celebrity scale, pose for a photo or shake someone's hand, and we have no earthly idea who those people are or what they might have done.
Can I just say we're so far down the list that it actually really makes us happy. Like, it makes my day when people come up in the airport like, "Hey, from the Buck and Clay and Buck show, like, you're awesome," and I'm like, "Yeah, thank you." We're, for Brad Pitt, it's an annoyance. For Clay and I, we're like, I must be having a good hair day.
I love getting to meet all of you out there. But every year and every election cycle, there are stories, and you guys know exactly what I'm talking about. Did you see this candidate shook hands with this person or posed in a photo with this person? And I have to tell you, most of the time, you're just trying to be friendly, and I know certainly politicians are doing the same. They have no idea who they are meeting with. Okay, so I actually do believe that Donald Trump got completely and totally set up for this story. And if you're not familiar with the story, Kanye West asked to meet with Donald Trump. Kanye West came to Mar-a-Lago. He brought this guy with him who is, I'm going to be honest, I had never heard of him. Buck, you said you had heard of him before,
Yes.
this guy?
Yeah, he's occasionally popped up here, and they're really just on social media, and people call him a troll, and he showed up, and he said he's kind of like been a provocateur at some events, but I've heard of him before, and I've never met him, never seen him anywhere.
Never met him personally. Like, I didn't know anything about him. So I feel like the way that this story blew up so quickly, I feel like this was a calculated attempt to try to go after Donald Trump aggressively. I think Kanye West may well have set him up in some way.
But do you think I think that people set Kanye up, or rather use Kanye as the Trojan horse here to bring in the other people. Like, I think Kanye's got problems, obviously.
Unfortunately, I think Kanye's got big problems. But this whole meeting and the fact that it somehow turned into a monstrous story that everybody on the planet seems to be talking about.
Did we tell everybody what happened, though, yet? I'm not sure even our audience knows what happened.
So, I mean, basically, he went to dinner at Mar-a-Lago with this guy who is an anti-Semite, according to the definition. Again, I don't even know this guy. Like, most of the time,
they call him the white nationalist anti-Semite. His name is Nick Fuentes. And then there's Kanye and Milo Yiannopoulos, whom I actually know back from the early days of Milo. I had him on my early days radio show when he was working at Breitbart. So, and then Milo had a fall from the spotlight. I don't even really remember what it was about. But so it was Kanye, Milo, Fuentes, and I think one or two other people, and I can't even remember, a lady who at some point had worked with the Trump campaign named Karen, I believe, but that's who was at the dinner, I think.
Okay, so the fact that he had dinner with Fuentes in particular has turned into a major cultural flashpoint, and it rapidly spread from, oh my goodness, he had dinner with this person, to every Republican on the planet being asked for their opinion about who Trump had dinner with. And it has prolonged the news cycle to the extent, Buck, where it feels like basically it's been going on all week. And my position on this in general is, yes, certainly Trump can do a better job, and the people around Trump can do a better job of figuring out who he's dining with and who he's interacting with and all these things. But it feels like a calculated hit job to me on Trump, designed to, and who exactly is designing it.
So do you have? I don't have a theory.
No, I mean, I feel like that is my takeaway. And if you are a Trump person, I don't see any reason why you would be like, oh, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I can't support him anymore.
So here's what I see from my side of this, and I'm openly hostile to caring about celebrities outside of what it is that they generally do. Meaning, I think that celebrity relationship gossip stuff is a giant waste of everybody's time and makes everybody dumber. I have watched a little bit of The Crown, which ties to the royal family.
I told you this was going to happen.
I have a fiance, Clay. I have responsibilities, sir.
I told you this is going to happen. Every woman on the planet has watched at least one episode of The Crown.
But I'm still openly hostile to these concepts, I will say, of caring about
the
other
royal family. I'm very much involved in the drama. I love all of it.
Anyway, but with Kanye, he actually has gone beyond being a music and fashion and cultural icon to also crossing over a little bit into politics during during Trump's first term, or Trump's term. And now obviously he's a guy who's back in for saying a lot of bad stuff. And the reason I say it that way, I'm not trying to, in any way, what's the word I'm looking for? Downplay it. It's just, I think he's having a mental, I think it's like the Will Smith slapping somebody moment, except Kanye is kind of going through that ongoing, where he's having real mental health crises. So my sense of this, and I don't pay very much attention to, I don't know these other characters, is that they see a guy who has a massive celebrity and is immediate clickbait, really, right? I mean, anything with Kanye's name on it as a headline, people are going to click on, and they attach themselves to him and come up with this idea. And look, now people are talking about them all over the country. I do get the frustration from people who say, well, why? Like, no one should talk about this incident. I only think it's worth discussing from the standpoint of, one, Trump now has apparently said that, he thinks this was a bad idea.
And he thinks he got set up. Yeah.
Yeah, he thinks he got set up. But beyond that, we have to stop playing the games by the other side's rules. They love this. Do you denounce? Like, what? Kevin McCarthy is denouncing this. What?
Mitch
Trump
McConnell
obviously doesn't know who this little weirdo is that was tagging along for the dinner. Like, has no idea.
That's my point on this.
Yeah, of course. And so it's not like Trump is putting his stamp over, and they've lied about Trump. They lied about what Trump said about Charlottesville. They lie about Trump all the time. And on top of all this, you get all these Republicans who are rushing to get a little pat on the head from the New York Times for 1 second for saying, oh, I denounce this and this is terrible. Did they denounce things? Hat tip Mike Cernovich, who pointed out on Twitter that, Barack Obama never was demanded to denounce the photo of him with Louis Farrakhan,
no doubt.
buddy, right?
Yeah.
So why do we do it? I hate this. People go, oh, I'm so scared. They're going to call you a racist anyway, everybody. They're going to what happens when you denounce, they say, well, clearly he felt guilty for his ideological sympathies. That's why he wanted to denounce it. This is like dealing with the gulag and the commissar sitting there saying, confess or we'll throw you in the gulag anyway. There's no upside.
I think you're responsible for your own actions and your own behavior. I don't like the idea of you're responsible for someone that you took a photo with, or you're responsible for someone at a group dinner that sat at your table, right? And every political opinion that they have automatically imputes itself to you. But in this particular situation, where I do agree with Trump on the setup aspect of it is, nobody knows this dude, right? Like, by and large, there's no people at the Washington Post. He's 24 years old. He's got his own political opinions. I'm sure that I disagree with the vast majority of them if he's truly an anti-Semite. But the idea that this guy is such a significant political figure that Trump was making some sort of calculated attempt to turn his back on Jewish supporters, or that it's an insult that everybody in the whole political arena needs to be responding to, this is where we 100% are in agreement, Buck. We got to stop this game, right? If Trump comes out and says something and you disagree with it and you're a political figure, I think that is 100% fair game. That's literally what politicians do. They give you ideas and we debate them and you're either for or against them. Who happens to be showing up for a dinner at a table that the guy didn't even know that he was going to be there, and somehow you're commenting on this?
Right.
I just think
I also want to point out,
a mess.
This isn't like, George W. Bush isn't at a bumping members-only club every night with hundreds of people. So this is a different context. These people are going to say, well, you should do a better job of who you have dinner with. Okay, yeah, obviously this slipped through and this was unwise. I'm not going to sit here and say that, clearly they've used this to attack him all week now. It's been good. It didn't just happen. I think it happened. What was last Friday?
It's been an entire week's news cycle. That's
CNN.
Certainly true.
I'm at the gym, and the gym, I will tell you, when I'm in the Florida gym, the New York gym, it's CNN all the time. Florida gym, Clay,
Fox News.
Fox News on.
You're in the
at least
People's Republic.
Half.
I mean, you are in the red state America now, brother.
Yeah, and I'm spending more time here in the winter because I like it down here in South Florida. And anyway, but I'm back up to New York sometimes, and so I see the difference. It's amazing. You could tell. It's 50-50 CNN, Fox News. CNN's been running with this story like it's the biggest story all week. Trump has dinner there. And I don't even... The fact we've been talking about it is some level of frustration, but it's been such a story that everyone else is using to attack. They're forcing us on some degree of defense here. And I don't even think... Trump shouldn't have to defend himself from this in the sense that he has dinner...
Of all the things that Trump does... This seems to me to be so far down the list of things that he's actually responsible for.
And if you want to go after him, son-in-law is Jewish and his daughter converted to Judaism. What are we even talking about?
He moved the embassy. I'm not sure there's anybody who is more beloved in Israel in all of American politics right now than Donald Trump. He's clearly not anti-Semitic. If you want to go after Trump because you don't like the statement that he put out about Ron DeSantis or Glenn Youngkin, like those are very attackable to me level disputes and debates that people can get involved in. But the idea that this has turned into a week-long story, to me, is evidence that it feels like, to me, somebody was trying to set Trump up.
I just want to point out that the thing about Mar-a-Lago is Trump is there. He eats dinner. They have him kind of roped off sometimes with Secret Service, but he's just out there. And there are all these people who are there, and they come over. They want to shake his hand. They want to take photos of them. People join him ad hoc. And this is night after night after night. So it's not, Trump is almost like a restaurateur. And people are coming and going from his restaurant all the time. So when you think of it in that context, it's much more understandable how this kind of thing, how often do I sit down and have dinner with like 3 random people? Well, never, but I'm not running Mar-a-Lago. I don't own it. So it's different.
I also think, Buck, to the bigger picture here, intent matters, right? If you're going to criticize somebody, make sure that they are intending to do something, right? There was no intent here on Trump's behalf. Like, that's why I say if you want to rip some of these public statements that he puts out about, like I said, Ron DeSantis, Glenn Youngkin, whatever else, those are fair game. But he didn't intend to sit down to dinner with this guy. Now, if you want to criticize his staff and say, oh, they've got to do a better job of figuring out every single person's background who was sitting at the table with him, I would also say this. This is the celebrity angle. Kanye West, whoever the people are.
He's a global celebrity, and Trump loves celebrities.
But he's got an entourage. Right? I'll give you an example. At the Super Bowl 2020, Deontay Wilder is the heavyweight champion of the world. We were doing a show with him. 20 people rolled in with Deontay Wilder. 20 people, Buck. Like an entourage, the likes of which I have rarely seen. We got pictures taken with everybody in that entourage. We hung out with him. I have no idea what any of the people in Deontay Wilder's entourage do for a living, what backgrounds they have. The celebrity culture, I don't think it's uncommon if you roll into a Hollywood club or if you're at Mar-a-Lago or you're in any of these places, the entourage, nobody knows who's involved in the entourage.
And it just, but on the Republicans, because that's the other part of this too. I think we could have ignored it, except all these Republicans, Kevin McCarthy, now the soon-to-be House Majority Leader, all these Republicans are, it's so terrible, and I need to. No, we don't. We have nothing to do with white nationalists. We have nothing to do with anti-Semites.
Everybody condemns them.
Idiots.
Yes,
everyone hates them. Like, don't do this thing. We're always, and that's what the part of this that frustrates me is we play by the rules the other side is using in bad faith to create news cycles to undermine our team. And also, I'll say this, man, to your point about legitimate versus illegitimate criticism of Trump from within the right, a lot of people see this and they see what other Republican elected officials are doing, and they're saying, this is actually why we need Trump, because these guys are cowards. Because the first moment they get any pressure and anyone says, but he's you don't want to be called a white nationalist or an anti-Semite, they run for cover. It's like, well, there's no reason that you should be called those things because you're not. So why are you being a weirdo about it?
Just tossing this out, too. Generally speaking, you would not expect for a guy in Kanye West's entourage to be a super racist.
You wouldn't expect a white nationalist. That's right. That's not.
I mean, I think it's not crazy for Donald Trump to expect that a black guy is not rolling around with white supremacists.
And they call Trump to be fair, also they've been calling Trump a white nationalist for years. They say crazy stuff all the time.
Exactly. But anyway, I thought we should talk about it because I've been talking about it for a week, and I actually think Trump is getting attacked here in a way that isn't justified based on the facts. Legacy Box will provide you and your family with a simple and safe way to digitize your treasured videotapes, film reels, and photos. They've helped well over 1 million families, including my own, do just that. Not to mention, everything is done by hand right here in the United States. I was at my mom's house for Thanksgiving. She brought out an old VCR tape. She said, I got to remind you, I want to make sure that we digitize this forever because it was my grandfather's last Thanksgiving. And she wanted to make sure that our kids and generations to come can see what that experience was like and just see him, hear him talk, have all of the pictures and video preserved forever. How many of you out there just now for Thanksgiving had a similar experience at your Thanksgiving? Let Legacy Box preserve your family members' memories forever with their Cyber Week event. Get 65% off their normal price this week. It's the best deal of the year. LegacyBox.com/Clay to save an unreal 65% off. That's LegacyBox.com/Clay for 65% off. LegacyBox.com/Clay.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our friggin' health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley Podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley Podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley Podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Clay and Buck. We're going to come back in here in a couple of minutes with the new Democrat leadership in the House. Clay has some thoughts on what it's going to mean that Hakeem Jeffries will be taking up that role, that position. We'll talk about that coming up here shortly. And then if we have, I haven't heard your after action report on the USA versus Iran, but maybe we can get to that a little later.
No doubt. Excited to have that game. We're going to be playing against Netherlands on Saturday. Tuttle Twins extending their Cyber Monday deal. These are great books for kids to read and learn from. 50% discount on these free market books, a curriculum designed with activities for both young and old kids. Look, if you're looking for a great offer, a great gift out there for your kids or your grandkids, and you want them to read and you want them to learn a little bit more, they're going to be able to navigate subjects like inflation, how business and money work in the real world, while also being entertained. It's a great gift for any young student out there. I love them. My kids have liked them. Your parents all over the country have been blown away. You can get 50% off right now if you go to TuttleRadio.com. Special deal, TuttleRadio.com. 50% off the free market economic curriculum offer. One more time, TuttleRadio.com. That's TuttleRadio.com. Welcome back in, Clay Travis, Buck Sexton Show. We appreciate all of you hanging out with us. So, Buck, we have a new leader replacing Nancy Pelosi in the House. Nancy Pelosi giving up the Speaker's gavel. She is now, I think, just basically representing her San Francisco area district. And she is, of course, no longer the Speaker. And Hakeem Jeffries has replaced Nancy Pelosi. And I want to give credit here to, I believe it's Greg Price who tweeted this out. But he had done a little bit of a deep dive into Hakeem Jeffries' Twitter history. And Buck, really major threat to democracy here. It seems the Democrats are now led in the House by an election denier. I don't know whether they're going to have an investigation into this, but here is Hakeem Jeffries. The more we learn about 2016 election, the more all caps illegitimate it becomes. America deserves to know whether we have a fake president, all caps, in the Oval Office, hashtag Russian interference. So, Buck, I've been told, and I know you have too, that it is completely unacceptable to question the outcome of any election, or else our democracy itself is in peril. Will anyone, we just talked about this ridiculous story from Trump where everybody has walked around and asked questions. Oh, do you condemn Donald Trump for having dinner with? Will anybody in the media working in the United States Capitol ask any Democrat whether they condemn Hakeem Jeffries denying the outcome of the 2016 election? Will there be a single question asked about this? Just compare it to how the Trump dinner has been covered and how eager Republicans have been to run out and give their own condemnation. I bet there's not a single question asked about the tweet that I just read to you.
Nope. And I do always like to put out this proviso, this framework that it's important to discuss the hypocrisy, but understand that they know they're doing it too. They do it because they can, right? They do it because they know the media is completely in their pocket and on their side. So, of course, they're not going to ask the relevant question based on the standards that they set for Republicans, because they're not actually standards. They're just excuses for attacking Republicans, right? And that's, by the way, I was talking about not denouncing. Think of all the people that were being asked, do you denounce the 2020 stolen election claims? How many people have been asked running for office to denounce the Russia collusion lunacy? I mean, it's not the lie. What is more believable when we're talking about stolen elections? What's a bigger leap? That there were people who manufactured, meaning they filled out ballots that were freely floating all over the place, collected them, harvested them illegally. I mean, I'm not saying that happened even. I'm just saying what's more believable, that happened in a COVID year with some states going to universal mail-in registration, etc., or that Donald Trump had a secret plan with Vladimir Putin of Russia to hack into voting machines and to change the vote totals because the wonderful candidate Hillary Clinton really actually won. Which one of those sounds crazier? What's amazing, Clay, to the libs? The one about Russia is much more believable to them to this day, and they never get asked to denounce it.
And they never get held accountable for all the lies that they spread. And I just think it's really interesting that a guy with election denying in his background is now the leader of the House Democrats. And there will be almost no questions asked about it. And building on the idea of condemning Trump for that dinner for a moment here, if you don't think Trump should be the nominee for 2024, just own it and say it. Don't be a sniveling, whiny little brat who's trying to act like this dinner is such a big story that you have to rush and say something about it. Just own it. If you want to support somebody else because you think they are a better political candidate than Donald Trump, don't hide behind a dinner and use it as an excuse to take a shot at Trump. Just own your opinion that you don't think he should be the nominee in 2024. Because at least have a spine, at least have the willingness to tell people what you actually think there, as opposed to running around and saying, oh, it's unacceptable who he had dinner with. I mean, we're going to spend more time in this country with the media covering Donald Trump's dinner with a dude that nobody even knew, right? It's not like this guy is super famous. Most of you out there had no idea who this guy that is supposedly so unacceptable to have dined with, just like Trump didn't. And so, I mean, if David Duke had come to Mar-a-Lago and sat down, okay, David Duke, has a history. Trump should know him. He shouldn't have dinner with him.
But, the only time anyone ever hears about David Duke, Clay,
is when they're desperately
when a Republican
searching
is running
for a white supremacist.
Every 4 years, there's some journalist who will find a Republican candidate and say, do you denounce David Duke? I mean, literally, I don't even know if that guy's still alive. I have no idea.
That's how desperate they are to find somebody who they can actually classify as a white supremacist because they're so rare in this country, right?
They always tell us about the threat of white supremacy and how they said that there was a white supremacist in the White House, Donald Trump. They say this all the time. Meanwhile, the fastest way to get fired from basically any job you have is to say something that maybe isn't even intentionally racist, but someone else construes as being racially insensitive. But there's white supremacy everywhere. Any job in America, you say something that hits that third rail of race in the wrong way, even if people, this has happened in sports, right? It's happened when people have said things that actually weren't racist at all, but triggered some sense that there could be some racial, and they lose their jobs.
Yeah.
But that's the country that has the white supremacy problem. It's everywhere. It's rising all around us.
It's honestly the only thing that you can do and not be able to come back from, right? So if you are a white supremacist, you actually have less power than almost anyone with any political belief in the country, because you're done for if you even come close to that position. And speaking of which,
can I just also add, they will say that people who aren't white are white supremacists if they're Republican as well. Like, that's the lengths the left will go to. Remember, they said this about Larry Elder
was the black white supremacist.
He's a great guy, and he was running in California. They said he was the black face of white supremacism.
Yes.
was the line that was used. I think it was either the San Francisco Chronicle or the LA Times. I mean, they just want to use the slur of white supremacy. They want to use that attack on anybody as often as they can because they don't have good arguments.
Well, we were going to play I think I told you we'd play this audio. It kind of ties in here yesterday because we talked about it a bit. But CNN, this is Elizabeth Cohen. Not only do they police speech in general, they police speech that is not remotely racist and try to make sure that it's eliminated. Monkeypox. Monkeypox was considered to be too racially inflammatory. This is the truth. So they have changed the name of monkeypox to Mpox. And here is a CNN contributor, Elizabeth Cohen, praising the WHO for renaming it. Listen.
Monkeypox has a new name?
It does have a new name. So the WHO says it's Mpox. And there's an interesting reason for this, kind of a sad reason in many ways. There is a concern that monkeypox, that the word engendered stigma. What the New York City Department of Health said was, look, we're joining others expressing serious concern about using the word monkeypox, given the stigma it may engender and the painful and racist history within which terminology like this is rooted for communities of color. Just another note that monkeys have nothing to do with this virus. It's really a misnomer. So it's now Mpox.
Okay. What about avian flu? What about swine flu? What about, I'm just wondering, does, Lyme disease, named for Lyme, Connecticut, where it was first discovered, are the people of Connecticut deeply offended and shocked by Lyme disease, the tick-borne illness? I mean, this is the same thing when you start talking about history and pulling down statues and stuff. Where does this end?
It doesn't.
Are we going to have to give all the diseases numbers? That's
why they did. That's why they renamed COVID. Remember, initially COVID-19. It was there couldn't be a connection to China, even though that's where we believe it came from, and even though naming viruses and illnesses off of their location has been standard, even if it's sometimes wrong. The Spanish flu didn't actually originate in Spain.
And do you remember they tried to convince everybody that Mpox was, see, that's going to happen,
it's a danger for everyone. Danger
for everybody. Watch out. It's coming for everybody. And then the data started to come together, and it is really a risk to very specific subset of behaviors.
As long as you aren't involved in gay orgies, you basically had a 0% chance of getting monkeypox.
Yep.
And I think most people have managed throughout their life to avoid gay orgies. Not everybody, but most.
So there's an unspoken truth among men in this country. Testosterone levels in the average guy are getting lower each year. You can thank our changing diets for that, environmental factors, and the war on so-called toxic masculinity. But it's true. Testosterone's down about 50% over the last 50 years, 1 percentage point for each year It means you experience less energy every day and less focus too, as healthy testosterone levels are essential for your body to function at peak performance. But there is a solution. There's help. It comes from a company called Chalk. This company researched the heck out of this unspoken problem, but real one, and found the right herbal ingredients that'll help the body. They put those ingredients into a daily supplement that does wonders for guys across America. Check out their Male Vitality Stack. Testosterone levels go up 20% in the first 90 days of consistently using Chalk. You won't find Chalk in stores, but you'll find it online on this easy to navigate website, Chalk.com. CHOQ.com. Go online today. Use my name, Buck. You'll get 35% off a Chalk subscription for life. Not a week or a month, but for life. So long as you continue to subscribe to a monthly delivery of this great product. Of course, you can cancel at any time you want, but you're not going to want to when you see what great results you get. Go to Chalk.com. That's CHOQ.com. Make sure you use my name, Buck, as the promo code for 35% off. That's Chalk.com, promo code Buck.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our freaking health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
The Monica Crowley Podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley Podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley Podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley Podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Closing up shop here today on Clay and Buck, and appreciate you rolling with us, hanging out with us. If you missed any part, please go back to the Clay and Buck podcast. And also, I'll be doing a Rumble show later this evening. It's rumble.com/Buck Sexton. Clay streams on Twitter at Clay Travis, and Clay, the sports things that are going on, the World Cup.
Did you enjoy the U.S.-Iran game?
We didn't really get to talk about it because it was obviously going on when we were on the air. Yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's good that we beat Iran, but we kind of had to beat Iran in my mind, so I don't really. It was a must-win. It was, and in every sense, a must-win for the honor of our team, but also for going forward in the World Cup process. And so now this is officially the best the furthest a U.S. team has ever gone to the World Cup, right?
No. We went to the, a long time ago, I think we went kind of far, like in the 50s or something. But we were in the round of 8, I believe I'm correct about this,
really?
In like 1998 or 2002, if I'm doing my math right there. Yeah, we beat Mexico, I feel like, in the round of 16 and advanced to the round of 8 at one point. In our lives, the best that we've done is the round of 8. And there may be older people out there who remember.
It says here the round of 16 in 1994 we got to.
That was the U.S. That was the one we hosted. I feel like in 98 or 02, the one that took place in Korea, I think we went to the round of 8. We won a game in the knockout stage.
Oh, quarterfinals. You're right. Quarterfinals. Right. That's true. Okay. Wow. So we did better than I had anticipated.
Yeah, now that one a lot of people missed because if I remember correctly, it was in South Korea, and so the games were in the middle of the night. They were not easily able to be watched. And so it kind of a little bit slid under the radar in 2002, but we went to the round of 8.
Some fun fact here. And look, this is just according to Wikipedia, so I got no fact check on this beyond this, that the U.S. actually got to the semifinals of the World Cup in 1930, which was the first ever World Cup.
Yeah. I thought that we had success. I knew it was like a long, long time ago.
So why were we good at soccer in 1930, Clay, and then we just, stunk for like 50 years?
My guess is they probably weren't playing much soccer in Latin America in the 1930s. Like, how many countries were actually competing in the World Cup in 1930? I bet there weren't that many countries involved. Now there are 32 teams that make the World Cup, and it's actually kind of hard to make it. I bet the 1930 World Cup, there were only like 10 or 12 teams that actually made it.
And I've seen two different figures for this, but Cristiano Ronaldo, who is one of the most globally famous people in existence, because of the popularity globally of soccer. I think he has like Taylor Swift level Instagram following.
Yes.
I mean, he's at that. I think he probably is in the top 10 of all people on planet Earth in one of those big social media platforms. He's going to get paid to play in Saudi Arabia $120 million a year.
I saw that story. Good for him. I mean, the amount of money, and this is becoming
How can that be worth it? How do the economics of that add up?
I don't think the economics of it add up. I think that there are a lot of these Saudi, Middle Eastern oil-rich countries are basically deciding, hey, how are we going to advertise that our countries are open for business? And they're just deciding one of the best ways is by going to grab these global superstars and put them to work in their countries. And I'm curious whether it's going to work. It's obviously like the Live Golf that we're seeing now, where they went out and signed up all the top golfers in the world, or many of them.
How's that going,
I think
by
this
the
is
way?
Similar.
The Live Tour.
I think the Live Tour is going to be pretty good. I mean, they're not going under, right? I think ultimately the PGA and the Live Tour are going to have to sue for peace with each other, and they'll end up merging back together at some point. That's my theory down the line. But they've got a lot of super talent, and you got the best
talent. The highest
talent.
paid athlete on the planet, if that goes through, will be Cristiano Ronaldo. He'll make more money than any NFL player, any NBA star, any Formula One, which I only got into in the last 2 years because of the Netflix show, which is getting bigger in America. Some of the highest paid athletes in the world are Formula One drivers, which I did not know until I saw that series. They make $40 million, $50 million.
Tennis
That's
players.
not including endorsements. That's just to be the guy in the car.
Yeah, tennis players obviously are racking up money beyond belief. There is an argument, and I think it's true, that the globalization of sport, which has certainly occurred, is going to put the top apex athletes on a level of earnings that it's frankly even hard to comprehend. And I think the idea of a guy making over $100 million a year, like Cristiano Ronaldo would be doing, is one of those that's like kind of difficult to contemplate.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of people they can sell to. I mean, I think that's the key, is bringing the whole brand globally.
Speaking of a lot of money, you see Howard Stern called out Oprah for being too flashy with her money. Do you think Howard was calling her out from his like $60 million Hamptons mansion when he's talking about the flashiness of Oprah's money?
Howard Stern didn't go out to dinner for 2 years, Buck. He didn't go out to dinner with anybody because he was so afraid of COVID. One of the biggest rebels in sports. What a huge pussy willow that guy turned into. It's unbelievable to me. You could spend 2 years basically in a bunker. That's what he did.
Yeah, my problem is I go out to dinner too much. I got to lay off.
Join the club.
The Monica Crowley podcast is a whip-smart, fast-paced, sassy blend of politics, culture, history, and humor, all brought to you with the sunny optimism of Ronald Reagan's happy warrior spirit. Hi, I'm Monica Crowley, and I've served 2 American presidents, Richard Nixon in his last years as Foreign Policy Assistant, and Donald Trump as Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. You've seen me on TV, read my New York Times best-selling books and popular columns, and now you can download my podcast, where you will hear one-of-a-kind insights and interviews. So join me on the Monica Crowley podcast. It's true appointment listening. Join our legion of happy warriors here on the Monica Crowley podcast. Listen to the Monica Crowley podcast on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Almost everything in our society today has turned into something divisive.
And the same's been done to us with our freaking health. There's not a person on this planet who hasn't been through stuff that's impacted their mental health.
Divorce, job loss, breakups, abuse.
The result? We are all a little crazy.
But big pharma and app companies tell us the affected people need what's being sold to fix them.
We're All a Little Crazy is a podcast that flips all that BS on its head.
We talk about current events in the world of sports, entertainment, politics, pop culture, music, and how mental health is at the center of all of it. So join us on We're All a Little Crazy and listen to critical conversations on mental health with me, co-host Darren Ravel, Sports Business Insider.
Me, Theo Fleury,
NHL great,
and mental health advocate and member of the Same Here Alliance.
And I'm Eric Hewson, your co-host.
Listen to We're All a Little Crazy on the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.